Welcome to the second module, everyone. Hopefully most of you attended the first one, so you know what we're focusing on, but we'll cover a little bit what we went over last time. So again, the purpose is to go over things that are important for startups to make them more attractive to investors. Again, most of you are competing in the Pitch, Launch, Grow competition, so this is a little more relevant, and we're happy to work with you one-on-one to work specifically on your deck, but this is the overview for everyone who is working on their pitch decks. Okay. So today we'll focus on market opportunity and go-to-market strategy. And we'll try to use some of the frameworks that you can use to work on your pitch deck when it comes to those slides. So kind of to recap, what makes a startup investable? The big things are unique value proposition, attractive market size, which is what we're going to talk about today, your team, the execution, your advisory board, and financials and pitch decks, meaning you have to be attractive to investors. And you will hear a lot that team is actually the most important aspect, but we're going in, some of you are having teams that are young and advisory boards become more important, and we'll cover that in the next module. So today, a quick recap of the last week's session. We talked about the value proposition. And again, that's what makes your startup stand out. Customers have jobs that they are focusing on doing. They either want a gain, they want something more, or they have pains that need to be eliminated. Your job is to provide that for them. And if you can eliminate their pains, or you can give them gains as they're fulfilling their tasks, as they're doing their own jobs. And what we focused on last time is really, they're not there to purchase your gadget or your service, your product. They have their jobs, they're going through their lives, business lives, and they need something. And they're looking out to hire your product or service to help them. And that's how you have to look at it. You have to look through the eyes of the customer. So today, market size. So why do we talk about market as part of being investable and part of being attractive to investors? If the market is not big enough, you don't have an opportunity to make enough money for investors to risk their savings, their money to invest in you. Does it guarantee that you will make money? Obviously not, but at least you have to have an opportunity. So TAM, SAM, SOM is the most sort of universal way to communicate the market size. Total addressable market, serviceable addressable market, and serviceable obtainable market. And we're going to go into detail. We'll narrow each one, gets slightly tighter until we get to the beachhead, which is your SOM, your serviceable obtainable market. So when we talk about TAM, this is really sort of the industry level that we're talking about. How big is the industry that you're playing in? It doesn't mean that you can grab that chunk of the market, but investors need to know, is it a big industry or is it a small industry? You can also look at it. So a lot of times it's sort of a bottom-up approach, and the number that you will get is just an industry number. What's the pharmaceutical industry looking like? What is the construction industry looking like? What is digital health looking like? How big is that market? So a lot of times it's just very much top-down. You can also do it bottom-up, and in this case, this is the overall revenue opportunity that is available to your product or service if 100% market share is achieved. Now, it's almost never even possible to do that because some people will never be able to afford your product. Some of them will never be able to reach your product, meaning you don't have ways to delivering it to them. But if you want to think about it, it's everyone who could buy your product or service. So how do you narrow down your TAM? It's basically, if you think of the global, geography is one way to do it, and it's, think of it more as a metaphor as well. So if you are trying to narrow down your TAM, it's, let's say you pick a Pacific Ocean as your TAM. That's your industry. That's the pond that you're playing in. So SAM is serviceable addressable market. Now you're thinking of customer segments that are a perfect fit for your product. Now, we're not talking about early adopters. We're talking about everyone who would be perfect for your product or whom your product would be perfect for. So I like to say everyone who should buy your product, because some people could use your product. Should they really? Maybe not. Again, don't promise to boil the ocean. At this point, you're getting more realistic. This is just not an industry number that you're throwing on the slide. So again, when you're narrowing it down, if TAM is your Pacific Ocean, you have to pick islands in the Pacific Ocean as your SAM. Again, think of it as a metaphor. SOM is serviceable, obtainable market. That is your beachhead. This is the revenue from the beachhead customer segment. That's your niche. This is everyone who would buy your product. So when you're communicating to an investor, that's what you're communicating to them. And that's the one that they pay the most attention to as far as numbers. They will be very forgiving if you just throw pharmaceutical market as your TAM. They're not going to be that forgiving if you throw big numbers without any story behind it as to what your SOM is. So if you think of narrowing down, you were in the Pacific Ocean, now you're in islands in the Pacific Ocean, now you picked a specific island and the beachhead, and that's where you're going to land. That's the first market that you will attack. So I already mentioned that a lot of times you calculate top down or bottom up. You almost have to go bottom up for SOM. There are times when you would use simply a percentage, but it's really not preferable, and investors frown on that. So if you just say, well, TAM is this number, SAM is smaller, and then SOM is just a percentage, a sliver of that. You have to be more specific. Like you have to articulate, well, what island are you trying to reach? And it becomes important because you have to articulate how you will get to that market. 1% of everyone is not realistic. How will you throw your marketing dollars? How will you allocate them? You need to know which island those people live on. Right? So there are a lot of challenges, and this really is an art and a science. And for those of you who are more sort of engineering minds, I know it gets super frustrating because you want to be precise, and sometimes you have to be a little generic. And then on the other hand, you can be a little too generic, and investors want you to be more precise. And so that art and science sort of clash. So the challenge is sometimes it's hard to define your industry or customer segment. And sometimes it's just the data availability. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. Especially if you're in a market that is newer and the data is not easily available. But the biggest mistakes are really overstating industry size or customer segment, focusing on global versus national. Sometimes if global is not possible or it's not plausible that you will reach global audience, or it'll take so much money that's really not realistic. Again, investors are looking for credibility. Does your story make sense? So last time when we talked about the value proposition, we used simple example. It's a fake example, but we're going to run with it. For working moms who are taking care of their toddlers, we offer self-cleaning diapers. So how would you create TAM, SAM, SOM if that's your value proposition? So you can look at global diaper sales and articulate them in units sold or in dollar signs. So you basically, all you're doing is you're getting industry data. How many diapers are sold globally? Then you're narrowing it to US. How many diapers sold in the US? And then finally, how many diapers are sold in California? That's a valid way to do it. If you're going bottom up, you're actually using your pricing and you're trying to get to those numbers by multiplying, right? So all moms with toddlers times the price per unit times units required will give you your TAM. Your SAM would be all working moms, as opposed to just all moms with toddlers times the price per unit times units. And finally, when you get to SOM, it's all working moms in California with toddlers times the price per unit you're charging times the units. Now, one thing to consider is, can you deliver? So you have to take your business model into consideration. So if you have to manufacture, how many units can you manufacture? So even if they're all working moms in California with toddlers times the unit price, if you cannot actually manufacture it, that's not your SOM. Now, it could be your SAM, right? You will eventually grow into it because as you grow, you will expand. And that's the whole idea. That's how investors look at it too. They know that SOM is your most realistic market. And slowly, as your resources grow, as your revenues grow, you start growing into SAM. And that's why it's important to not overpromise. It's in the future, but again, you need to articulate, well, how will you expand in the future? So I will stop for a second, and I will ask for anyone who wants to, and let me check the chat as well. Anyone who wants to open their mic and either ask questions or give an example of how they articulate their TAM, SAM, SOM, and see what feedback we get. I'm happy to have audience comment on your TAM, SAM, SOM, and give each other feedback. Yeah, and just feel free to unmute your mic and ask any questions.
This is Dr. Tom. I would say that it's kind of, you have to go back and forth in that you can identify your TAM, SAM, SOM, but you also have to realize your capacity, right? Mm-hmm. So and that's what you're talking about, servicing. And capacity is time, knowledge, service, partnerships, whatever. Mm-hmm. But also how much money do you have the capacity to spend and manage in your startup with the number of people that you have? So you have to be realistic in that regard as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And again, you when you're raising money, you're hoping to raise, let's say, 1 million. So you're trying to articulate how much you can capture with that 1 million. But sometimes you may not get 1 million, so that the number is shrinking. But again, you're trying to, just like you said, articulate, if you give me money, if you give me that much money, I can capture that much, right? I know a lot, I know everyone struggles with that one. Again, it's sort of going back and forth, and you will always get investors pushing back and questioning you. The only advice I can give you is make sure you can defend how you got to your numbers, really. If it makes sense to you and you can comfortably articulate where those numbers came from, just don't do percentages. That's sort of it's not a kiss of death, but investors don't like it. It just communicates to them that you're lazy and you don't know your segment enough. Tom, I know you're talking, but for some reason I'm not hearing you.
Okay. Would you change anything if you were a B2B or a offering services to B2B clients?
I would not necessarily change in which way? Oops, you're muted. You got muted again.
I keep going backwards. I have two mics that I have to unmute, and anyway, I'm here now. So the question is, for service business, you may not. This is where I get stuck, is in costing out my, because I offer services where my target's going to be CEOs, HR directors, HR professionals. The number, I don't have units necessarily, so I have problems creating a cost of, it depends on how many employees they're going to distribute this to and all of that fun stuff. So it's I get stuck in that because it's a app and it's a service. So okay. How do I cost it out?
Well, let me ask you. So your TAM, I would assume, is U.S. companies, right? That are big enough to have a CEO that has an HR, HR department, and
it's like medium-sized businesses.
Okay, so, mid-sized businesses. So that's your TAM, right?
Yes. And mid-sized businesses that have a program that value in their employees' well-being, right? So that cuts off a bunch of other people.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So when you, so your TAM, are you trying to do it bottom up or top down? Are you just saying
bottom up?
Bottom up. Okay. Yeah. are you going with so we can go with the number of mid-sized businesses, right? And then we can probably extrapolate that a percentage of them that are interested in well-being, that I would be okay with that being a percentage, because you're basically just acknowledging that there's some companies that just don't care.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So you're slicing this way, and that's a reasonable story. And then for an average mid-sized client, how much money will you generate? If you had unlimited resources. At TAM level, we're sort of unlimited. You have all the employees that you need.
Oh, it's going to be 250 K to 500.
Okay, and then you're just multiplying it by how much you will just charge each company, and then you arrive at your TAM, right?
Well, that's where I'm getting stuck. So the product is one-on-ones 5,000, group 10,000, series 15,000, right? So that's the cost of the service. So then it's a matter of how do I estimate the number, which ones they're going to buy, or the market opportunity for those.
Right. So that's the one where the art comes into play, and you just have to let go of being precise, and
Yeah.
you're averaging. So if I ask you what's the minimum, um, and, and then what's the maximum, right? You have, like, let's say 3 tiers. So basically your second tier becomes the average, right?
Right.
And then basically you can eyeball as to what do you think really the appetite is. Will they go for, again, that second tier?
Right.
And if you're comfortable with that, that's sort of that's how you can do it. Now you can, because it's TAM and it's not as critical to be precise, you can actually push it a little bit, that number, because you can overestimate, because it's who could use your service, right? And almost any of those mid-sized companies could use your tier 3 service, right?
Right. And then
So
the serviceable is going to be cut off by those who well-being, right?
right.
And then the next level is those who actually will buy. But
Right, and that can be based on how many you scalable, right? Meaning once you can multiply yourself, you don't need anyone to
Correct.
provide support, correct?
Correct.
So it's unlimited. Okay, so in this case, yes, you can just estimate what is you limited by your sales force in your marketing dollars, right? So that's where if you
And I take that back. It is serviceable. So
oh, okay, so you do need to account for how many you can actually service.
yeah, but I can contract. I have contractors that I work with to implement.
Okay. Then you're really just limited by your salespeople and your marketing dollars. So that's what I would say. Put a number on the board that you feel comfortable with. So if you were to, let's say, ask for $1 million, and you were to spend that $1 million on salespeople and marketing, what do you think is realistic? How many sales per month will you generate? And again, you just average the tiers, so don't worry about the tiers, but figure out how many customers can your salespeople deliver times the number of salespeople you can hire based on your overall, let's say, million.
Okay.
And then again, you will the part about the contractors that makes it a little bit easier, but then you also have your marketing budget, and you have to realistically say, well, I'm not going to spend more than, let's say, 10K per month potentially. Right? It's up to you how much you're comfortable given
Yeah.
all the expenses. But at 10K per month, how many leads can you generate for your salespeople that they can then close realistically? So it's very much tied to your financials, and we'll go over financials during the next module, but it becomes very sort of more and more precise. SOM becomes more precise than anything else.
Thank you. I always hope that was helpful to other people. Thank you. That was very helpful to me.
Thank you. Anyone else wants to try to demystify their particular situation?
Hi, I have a different kind of business. I'm a provider of medical education and grief support, hospice support to children. They're either directly patients or children of adult patients, which is the greater population right now. Children of adult patients getting support is kind of a hot ticket item right now.
Mhm.
I've been in private practice for a while, but I'm at the point where I'm getting more requests than I can meet myself, and I'm trying to expand my practice. And I mean, you can give me a room full of 50 screaming kids and I'm fine. You give me how to navigate my business and I'm totally stumped. So I don't know how to navigate to get resources to add more people before I can show actual profits from what I'm currently doing.
So are you considering going to raise money, or what is the main dilemma? Are you actually going to angels?
Um, I would definitely like to get investors to improve a lot of different aspects of what I'm doing,
Mhm.
social media, marketing, that kind of stuff. I know I definitely need to bump that up
Mhm.
because I get a lot of comments from families that it was difficult to find my particular business. And basically, I'm the only one in Orange County doing this.
Mhm. So I
Um,
think one of the questions to ask is your startup, not startup, it's a company, is your company appropriate for angel or VC investment? And that's where the market size and the size of the revenue will come into play. Because at some point you will get a pushback with investors saying, you are a great business, but it's what they call a lifestyle business, meaning you will never have an exit and they will never be able to make 10x return, in which case you may be going for a loan based on your revenue, existing revenue, and articulating that, look, I'm making that much money with these funds. Right? If I were to get a loan, I would be able to hire people and scale my business. And every time I hire someone, I get that much more revenue. But if that revenue is not big enough, you may not be able to be investable, and that's kind of the whole point. And it's not a bad thing. You may, because investors will take equity and they will take a chunk of that revenue. So it's almost, do you want to scale up your business only to have someone else say, thank you very much, you just made me money?
okay. Yeah, no, that's why I'm on these sites, trying to figure out where I fit into this whole realm of getting investors and growing the business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
because if you have revenue, you established business, you can actually get a loan much easier.
okay,
Because they're not looking for 10x return. They're just making sure that you pay back, and
okay,
that's your decision. If you feel comfortable that you can scale exponentially by bringing in technology instead of relying purely on people, hiring people, that may become attractive. But if it's only by hiring an extra person, and then every extra person gets you, let's say, extra 50,000, will those numbers, be enough? Or
right,
um, again, so I would look at it that way.
okay.
Mhm,
That's helpful. Thank you.
mhm,
So I had a question.
mhm. Okay.
My question is if, for example, the solution that we are building, we are currently targeting the agricultural sector as our market to sell, basically the wine industry in California.
Okay.
But the solution that we are building is indeed applicable to a wide variety of, verticals. Like it can
Beyond
be
wine.
into, yeah, energy or insurance, retail,
Okay.
all of that. But when we are doing the TAM, it should be with respect to a particular focused industry that we are going after, the beachhead, and the TAM built around that. Or should it say that, well, this is applicable to XYZ also,
Mhm.
but then we are as a SOM only focusing as a starting place in this particular market? How should we say that?
Okay. So there's no like recipe that's a perfect answer. This will be my version of it. And there's one, even if I sit long enough, I will give you 10 different versions of how to do it. So take it with a grain of salt. I would probably add the most attractive verticals, where it seems like those are the logical ones. If you were to, let's say, license it out today, those are the ones that would sort of purchase the license because they can see how attractive it is to build a business around it. So let's say it's 5 different industries. Maybe you're going agriculture, insurance, agriculture, and that can be your TAM. Now it's probably going to be a very big number.
Yes, that's why I'm worried.
Yeah, and you can look at it as a software, as your industry, right? You can pick, let's say, AI. Again, it's going to be a big number, but at some point you have to stop worrying about TAM and just throw that number there and say this is what it is. Because again, if you're looking at a report on a specific industry like software, it's a huge number, and it doesn't really mean a whole lot, but that's sort of you stuck with that number. That's the ocean you're playing in. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, because software is separate for a reason, right? It's more scalable because you don't need resources always. You can just multiply it like crazy. So you're justified in using just software as an industry and getting that number and putting it as TAM. Or again, combining a few verticals that you think are the strongest. Then your SAM would probably be, the most, again, depending on what you picked for TAM. So let's say software in general is your TAM, right? You said we're in the software industry, or AI, whatever you did. So SAM can be those most attractive verticals in that. And then your SOM will be your wine, and specifically in California, maybe. Now it can be a big drop, right? So I would maybe do SAM potentially, if I played it differently, I would do SAM as an agriculture, and then SOM as the wine industry.
Okay.
But one thing is, like, don't worry too much and don't overthink. You can TAM is the easiest one to sort of sleep at night without feeling bad, because that's just the nature of business. If you can do it, again, it's hard to do it bottom up because you are expanding in different verticals, and that requires a special license.
Right.
You're licensing it to different verticals.
So I was wondering, the question in my mind was that if I put these kind of figures, like in each vertical you have so much worldwide TAM market, and then SAM, and you come down to a focused SOM. I was thinking whether it would be construed as we're not focused in one particular area, rather than expanding different industries.
Again, and that's sort of the balance you have to hit between painting a bigger picture and making it attractive, but being realistic. So that's where TAM is your big picture, and you can tell this product can serve a huge number, a big number of industries and bring huge results in revenue. That's just basically says the sky is the limit. Whereas for someone like Colleen, right, the sky is not the limit. There's a smaller limit. There's only so many patients or so many children, or it's a finite number. Whereas for you, it may in fact be very big, and that's what investors look at. How big is Colleen's market as opposed to your market potentially? If you had all the money in the world, Colleen can only go so far. But then maybe she's charging a lot, so she can still get her revenues up.
Yeah.
But again, if you can focus mostly on SOM being realistic, because that's where it becomes important. If you overpromise on SOM, that's where you get the biggest pushback. If your beachhead is 2 even different industries, it's like, well, why would you do that? Right? Why would I give I want to give you money so you can capture and become a monopoly in your niche, And then when you learn everything you need to learn, including making all the mistakes and overspending, right? Because you will make mistakes. And if you overspend on a niche segment, you know, on your beachhead segment, you will learn, if you scale your mistakes, you're losing that much more money. So no one wants you to experiment in multiple industries with multiple segments
Right.
and lose money.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Hi, my name is Lakeisha. There we go.
Oh, hi,
My name
Lakeisha.
is Lakeisha. Hi. My business is Robotics Education and Drones Academy. I'm kind of similar to the previous, before the last lady. So we're in the process of becoming a non-public school, and we're trying to raise money so that we can also open up a group home. And a lot of the financing, because we're a nonprofit, they don't want to finance us for like we need like 65,000 for working capital for the for licensing for the state of California for the group home. You know, we're in the process of applying for grants, but in terms of the funding, is we've been open since 2019. You know, I've been basically funding it myself. I'm also a teacher. But in terms of the funding and trying to bring on more staff and grow the business, it's been a struggle. And I find myself, as you know, I know how she was saying before, you know, put me in a classroom. I've been teaching 13 years, like I'm rocking it. But when it comes to navigating the financial fund development, you know, I feel like I'm spending so much of my time writing grants and researching grants and trying to figure out how I'm going to fund staff, that I'm kind of drifting from what kind of my passion is. So that's the reason why I came, is just trying to figure out. I know once we're fully accredited that we will have, you know, funding from the government, but just in this stage right here, just trying to kind of make it there, it's been a real struggle.
Yeah. And in your case, you know, the fact that you have a chance to apply for government grants obviously helps. And if you find investors who see your model, understand it, and again, that's sort of an you know, part of the problem is they need to understand your model. You have an academy, and it's basically it's a private school model. They need to see the numbers. How much appetite is there for your services? And I know you and I talked before, so I kind of know a little bit that you can have the government pay for some to provide those services for those who cannot afford it. But the challenge would be, and the way I would approach it is getting the numbers, getting the revenues that you can achieve realistically with the students that you have, and scaling it up to beyond one school. So what it would look like, and you know, in your case, it's probably a certain amount of revenue you can get out of one school. You know how many your expenses per school, how many teachers you need to have. So it's a very much a concrete, specific number. Then does it make sense? It's kind of a little bit more like Colleen, right? Does it make sense to, you know, get a loan or a grant? And you know exactly how much more you will get with each school. But if you add those numbers up and you go to an investor and you say, look, forget about the grants, it takes forever. If we just pour money into it, right? I have enough students who will pay, that with each school we're bringing X amount of revenue, and that's a very attractive proposition for them. I think the problem would be that some of the students that you have that you can service depend on the government support to pay, correct? And so investors would need to look at those numbers, and if you have those contracts, they know that you can expand. If you're still getting those contracts, that's probably too early for an investor, because they will feel uncomfortable not knowing if it's a private school that is in the affluent area, and you have the numbers how many parents will actually pay. That's one thing. But if it's based on the government giving funds, you would have to have a little more traction with those types of contracts, government contracts.
And that's the thing. It's like, 120 days in one local SELPA, and then now I'm at the Department of State where they have 120 days to come and do 2 site visits, so on and so forth. So it's kind of like a waiting game. And then with the group home part of it, is because we're a non-public school, we want to work in conjunction with the group home to go ahead and get those students that are homeless and foster care and juvenile hall. But we have the home, but to put in our license, you have to have 65,000 in a bank account for them just to kind of look at, which is 3 months of expenses.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't get a loan because I'm a non-profit, so they're not giving me a loan. My personal funds and so on and so forth is not at that level. So I don't, at this point, I'm like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I would definitely go the grant route, or with loans that would maybe we can direct you to our SBDC finance department, but I don't think that it'll be easy to go the investor route because of so much uncertainty. Yeah. Thanks, Letitia. Anyone else wants, before I move on to go to market? So, so there's a lot of confusion, and unfortunately, it's because the way it is communicated and the wordage that we use. There are words like go to market. There's the words like market opportunity, and something like path to market or path to commercialization. And they all get sort of smooshed together. And what we see a lot is startups on their pitch decks mixing and matching and not having a clear understanding of what it means to investors. And it's, if you can think of market opportunity as TAM, SAM, SOM, that's basically an opportunity to make money. How big is the market? If you pour resources, can you make enough money back? So forget about path to market for a second. If you see that word, and if anyone's asking you to fill in the section that says path to market, it would depend highly on who is asking you that question. For investor presentation, think of market opportunity as TAM, SAM, SOM, and think of go to market as specifically articulating your marketing and sales channels to get to your niche market. So it does mean if you need to go to do FDA approval, it is sometimes I see that startups will put that into go to market because they think, well, before we get to market, we need to do those things, right? We need to get an FDA approval, we need to do clinical trials, or we need to start manufacturing if it's a tech, or we need to create our app and write the code. And that's not what investors mean by go to market. Go to market means you already have what you need. And again, you may need money to get there, right? To finish the R&D or to finish manufacturing. But go to market is, imagine you already have your product or service. And you already identified your SOM, so it's your beachhead market. So let's say if you were in a healthcare industry, you would say, I'm going after academic hospitals that perform specific surgery that requires my device. So how will you reach that segment? So going back to the metaphor, you have your Pacific Ocean, you have your islands, and then you have your beachhead specific island. Well, how are you going to get there? Are you going to take a boat? Are you going to take a canoe? How much money do you need? Are you going to send one salesman? Are you going to send 2, 3, 4? Will you go through a different organization? Will you hire independent salespeople? Will you pay them as employees? That's basically, and how will you let your customers know that you exist? That's what investors mean by go to market. And your go to market for them is important because if they're writing you a check, they need to know that once the product is finished and you have it, that you have thought through the steps of how you will get to your sales. So the first thing is B2B, B2C, and again, Dr. Tom, we talked about that. You asked the difference. It actually varies a lot, and if you're pitching to an investor who is not comfortable with B2C, you sort of pushing the rock up the hill. B2C in general requires a lot of marketing dollars. Now, the smaller your segment, the more distinct your segment, the less effort there is. So for example, Colleen has very specific market, right? It's, let's say pediatrics, and they have places where they sort of congregate. You can find them somewhere because they're looking for resources. Certain nonprofits are servicing them. And so Colleen can actually spend not a lot of money and find those people, even though it's B2C, it's those patients. But if you are creating a generic, let's say financial app, that's a little tougher because you can spend a lot of money just creating awareness, trying to sell it. And again, the narrower you are, the better off you are. So go to market, go very much hand in hand with your SOM and your segment, your beachhead. B2B is a little bit easier to articulate to investors, and some investors prefer B2B because there are only so many businesses. It's not, and there are ways to get to them because the channels are established. Okay, so you also have to think of your competition, because when you go into market and you're trying to reach that segment, are you making a decision to go after a specific segment because it's not serviced enough? Therefore, you have an opening to get there, and then you have a plan on how to get to them, right? And you constantly positioning yourself against the competition. So if you're going to academic hospitals who are performing specific surgery that requires your device, if they're using another device, that means that you're displacing someone. So when you articulate your go-to-market strategy, basically you're not creating a new market, you're going after existing one. And how are you going to displace? How will your salespeople win over that other salesperson sitting in the waiting room selling their product? So that's what investors want to know. That's why the competition matrix is important, because you're articulating basically how will your salespeople sell your product, and why will the customer prefer you over the competition. This is the most common way to create a competition matrix. You will list your benefits, again, not the features, but the benefits. So it's not that the device has 5 buttons. It's, you're articulating it's easy to use, and it's 5 buttons because 5 buttons allow you to do X, Y, Z, as opposed to having 100 buttons that, let's say, confuse the user, right? Or 1 button that's too, it's just too little, right? You're trying to find that sweet spot, but it's benefits, not features. And again, the first benefit is the one that, if you imagine your salespeople going into someone's office, that's what they're bragging about. That's the most important. That's why at the end of the day, someone would choose you. They may have the need for the benefit number 2, benefit number 3, but they really want number 1. And that's why you're going after that segment. So that's how investors are looking at the competition matrix. And then you have to articulate how will you maneuver around the competition. So you're looking for best channels to reach your customer segment. So what do you put on the slide? You have your sales channels, you have your marketing sales. So you can have a slide that says that you will be going through direct sales force, which means they're your people, they're selling your product and your product alone. They're your employees. So that communicates to investor that the money will be spent hiring people, finding those people who have that skill, and then they will be selling your product. So what are the other ways to reach your customer, right? You can contract with an external sales team. You can use distributors. You use strategic partnerships, and they sell to your customer already. They're not competing with you. It's just an add-on for them, but it makes sense because they can sell more of their product if they also sell your specific service or product to the same customer. And then you have direct to consumer versus online or traditional advertising. So let me pause here and open the mics to clarify anything that's still sort of muddy and not clear.
I have a question, I guess. It's not necessarily that what you have said isn't clear, but if I have hired someone to do my website and they're responsible for doing SEO as well, which is the search engine optimization, and I've also hired an influencer to come up with some marketing videos, is that all, like, I feel like right now my product is in the working prototype stage. So once I get the money to go to manufacturing, all I have to do is turn everything on and it's ready to start selling. So
okay, I'm assuming you're going B2C, correct?
yes, correct.
Okay, okay. Does your marketing team know how to get the most bang for their marketing buck? Meaning, are they, I'm assuming they would have the keywords that perform the best. They'd already dialed it in, they experimented, they did A/B testing, and by now they spent, less money that they used to spend at the beginning. And they have sort of the formula how they're capturing audience and how many of them are converting into solid leads.
That is my understanding. Yeah, I did hire I have a friend who, fortunately, she works in the food industry and she's taken a lot of products from nothing to, being top of their line. So she's the one who has recommended to me the search engine optimization group that built the website. So I am just assuming that she's led me in the right direction, but.
Okay. Well, that's what you would put on the slide. So if you go into investors, you would say that I'm a B2C business. And the way we get customers is we have a sales funnel. We have SEO is everyone has to have SEO almost. So you basically have to say we spend X amount on organic traffic, and that X amount means you're paying the marketing agency to tweak it, right? So it's not completely free.
Okay.
And then that marketing agency is also probably spending some money on Google Words, right, and actually paying.
Right.
Okay, so those would be your things to list on the go-to-market strategy. Once you articulate whom are you going after, what demographic, let's say it's women who are interested in fitness.
It's we already have that slide. It's going to be like the millennial to early 40s group.
Good. And the more narrow you get, the better, because if they sort of congregate in certain areas, and the influencers are important because then you understand those influences reach your specific demographic. So
Right.
that would also be on that slide. What I would say investors would, not maybe at the beginning, but they would ask you, has your marketing company figured out a way to reduce their marketing costs? Did they dial their ads? Did they figure out the formula so that they have to spend the least? Or are they at the very beginning? Because at the very beginning, by nature, they are experimenting. They don't, no matter how good they are, they will be experimenting because they've never sold your type of a product.
Right.
And they need to fine tune that formula before they're given all the money in the world to do it. Once they have that formula, then you can pour more money in, right? And you will generate the returns. It's just be very careful, and that's what investors will sort of poke around and they will try to understand. What is your cost of customer acquisition? Do those customers stick? And again, I think you're still launching, so you don't know if they will stick around or not stick around. What's the attrition? But again, how much does it cost you to generate a lead?
Now,
for them.
Would the web developer be the one to get that answer from?
That'll be your marketing person.
Okay.
So search engine optimization can be done by sort of tech people, but I'm hearing that you're doing it through a marketing team because they know how to take a product to market. So they would be, they're generating content on the website that obviously resonates with your market and captures those leads. Basically honey to the bees, right?
Yes.
but it's the marketing person that is generating ads, and they're putting ads out. They're figuring out which keywords to pay for to generate the leads.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you. Can I ask a question about that?
Sure. Mhm.
Because I'm looking for contracts in terms of, I want contracts from the district, from the Department of Justice, which is in terms of a grant to perform services.
Mhm.
So am I basically a B2B?
Yes.
Will that what I
Um,
am?
Yes, because who writes you a check isn't a business entity. If you were going after the students, meaning you were targeting parents and selling your services, like Montessori school is probably going more after parents, right? Um, you are going after government contracts, and they already have people, sort of students, ready for you. Right? You don't really, you don't go and you don't try to advertise to homeless people, let's say, right? You kind of, you go through the entity. So you would be B2B.
Hi, Laura.
I
This is
think
Tom Nichols.
Mhm.
Question relates to the strategic partnership because they can be investors as well
Mhm.
versus the investors that we're pitching to. So if your model is to look for strategic partnerships, how do investors view that? Because they can also see strategic partnerships as investors as well.
Correct. And that's what's attractive for them, is that they will invest money upfront right now. And they're waiting for you to basically get acquired, because they need liquidity. They need you to exit for them to collect their money. So if you have a strategic partnership, it's more likely that you already have someone, keeping a close eye on you, who may acquire, which is good for them. So they definitely like that. There's certain things with strategic partnerships that can become, complicated, and that is, are you able to work closely with them where they're not going to forget about you? Because, especially if you're working with a big company and it's not a turn-on solution where they plug you in and it's almost like a well-oiled machine. If it's, especially when it's an educational sale, let's say, educational meaning a customer needs to be educated why they actually need your product because they didn't know about it before. That can become tricky, because you have to work with that strategic to give them all the collateral, give them all the information, support them, or provide service if the customer needs, let's say, technical support, right? So strategic may be able to sell it for you, but then you need to service it. So there's a lot of things that are involved, but strategic partnerships are attractive for that precise reason. So investors do like it very much. Did I answer the question, or there's more to it than meets the eye?
It's a great starting point. Thanks, Laura.
So those are the metrics that matter to you and investors. So when we talked about marketing team and figuring out how little money they can spend to generate those leads, that's what investors would want to know. A lot of it comes in due diligence. And you need to be prepared for it, but like how many phone contacts per day, week, how many emails to get a response, how many free users to convert to paid users, what's the acquisition cost. And again, all those activities, they drive volume of leads, and that volume drives revenue. So you need to be able to articulate to investors that you know how to drive volume and then drive revenue, and how to close those deals.